Hey, what's going on? So I decided to make a video about all the 7 Spider-Man movies that we have so far. And if you want to check the first 2 Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, you can click right here. It's a full story. Now let's begin because this is a lot of work. In the first movie, we meet Peter Parker. He's a nerd and basically nobody likes him except for his best friend Harry Osborn, who's rich and his father is a scientist and owner of a big company. He's also in love with Mary Jane Watson, but oof, she has a boyfriend, come on. And at some point, Peter is taking pictures for the school paper at a lab where they are working with spiders and one of them bites him. And he goes home and not to the hospital for some reason. But he wakes up the next day with superpowers and a six-pack. Then he's like, I want to impress Mary Jane, and he thinks the best way is buying a car. So he sees an ad in the newspaper and it's about wrestling, and he's really strong, so it's easy money basically. He lies saying he'll go to the library, his uncle takes him there, and he says the most famous phrase in history.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
But Peter is like, whatever man, leave me alone, I just want my money. He beats the wrestler and he wants the cash, but he's told they'll only give him $100 because the match was not long enough, and man, the entire price was $3,000, like come on. Moments later, a man steals all the money from that place using a gun. And that's very important because the thief leaves the place and Peter does nothing, but the man had a gun, so who would be crazy enough to stop the guy? Because life is life, the thief ends up stealing Uncle Ben's car and killing him. Peter wants revenge. He chases the guy freaks out and falls to his death, and that's it. At the same time, the father of Harry, Peter's best friend, is losing a very juicy contract with the government because he wants to develop a chemical to make soldiers stronger, like Captain America. But right now, it has a few side effects, like you go crazy. I think that's probably important. He decides to test the thing on himself and he goes crazy too. I don't know what he was expecting. He didn't change a thing. The thing is that Spider-Man decides to become a superhero and also a photographer, and the other guy becomes a villain called the Green Goblin. So they end up fighting each other, and at the end of the movie the Goblin dies after being impaled with his own weapon trying to kill the spider. Oh, and Peter takes his body to his house and Harry sees that but doesn't know that's Peter and thinks Spider-Man killed his father for no reason. And Mary Jane says he wants to be with Peter, but he's too busy with the city, so no time for girls. By the way, this is a good moment to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you like this video, because we work really hard on it. So yeah, thanks a lot. Now, back to story. In the second movie, Peter's life is no good. He loses his job because he's always late. He's about to fail college because he's always late. He changes his mind and now wants to be with MJ, but he's always late, and he lives in this place because he has no money to pay something better, and it's New York, and have you seen the prices there? It's crazy! Anyway, Harry's now the head of his father's company, and he's working with Otto Octavius, who's a very good person actually, and wants to provide clean and renewable energy, but he's not very responsible. Because he's doing fusion in the middle of the city and not in the middle of nowhere. And because fusion is dangerous and difficult, he's using these robotic arms and he's using AI, and as he doesn't want the arms to influence him, he uses a chip to prevent that somehow. But obviously everything goes wrong. His wife dies, the chip is destroyed, Spider-Man disconnects the reactor because Peter was taking pictures in that place, and well, everything is a mess. The scientist is taken to the hospital to get those extra arms removed, and I get scared with that scene because the arms kill the doctors. It's freaking scary. Because stress can kill you, Spider-Man loses his powers, and after a small talk with his doctor, he decides to stop being Spider-Man. His notes get better, he's happier, it seems like he has a chance with Mary Jane, and that's important because she was even about to marry someone, and I get it, I mean, like, she can wait forever. But as crime goes up in the city, Peter changes his mind again and suits up again. He fights the now villain Dr. Octopus and he loses. Doc Ock takes him to Harry's because they made a deal. The doctor would get the spider and Harry would give him something to do the fusion thing again. Harry removes Peter's mask and is shocked. Who wouldn't? So Peter leaves and doesn't explain a thing cause we thought we needed another movie, but not the movie that we got. More on that in a second. Peter ends up fighting Dr. Octopus again and he wins with the power of words. He says, "Doctor, you wanted to do something good for humanity and this is no good. What were you thinking? Doing fusion again in the middle of the city?" And Otto Octavius says, "You're right. I'm gonna stop this, but you know, I'll die if I do it." And Spider-Man is like, "More action and less talking, please." This movie ends with Mary Jane skipping her wedding and kissing Peter instead. Oh, and Harry decides to kill his friend after discovering his father's workshop. In the third movie, Mary Jane and Peter are finally together, but Harry wants to kill Peter, but he hits his head with a pipe and he loses his memory for a while, so let's talk about another villain. From space, a gooey black thing comes and attaches to Spider-Man's suit, makes it black and makes Peter stronger and a bad guy. But I didn't understand why bad people dance in the middle of the city like that. Anyway, at the same time, a man is escaping police and he gets into this nuclear... I don't know if it is a nuclear thing, but it has to be. Like, it's always a nuclear thing. So he gets into this nuclear thing and it gives him the power of becoming sand. And at first it's just so sad, because he's trying to catch his wedding ring and he's not able to, and man, I wanted to cry so much. The thing is, at some point Peter is like, I don't want to be bad anymore, and because he realized fire and loud noises hurt the gooey black thing, he goes to a church and using the bell gets rid of that thing, but it ends up falling on a different guy who was also a photographer and hated Peter, and the new villain is called Venom, but doesn't look as dope as the new version. Harry recovers his memories, but his butler says the wounds in his father's body were self-inflicted. We have no idea why he didn't say that before, but we don't care. Venom and Sandman join forces and almost kill Spider-Man, but Harry helps him. Too bad he ends up dying, but that helps Peter, who is able to defeat Venom. Sandman is like, man, I just want to be a good person, and Peter is like, okay. And that's how this trilogy ends. Obviously, that wasn't a movie as good as the first two, so Sony decided to have a different Spider-Man. In the new movie, we start with a flashback where we see that his parents were scientists and died under suspicious circumstances. Years later, we see that Peter is supposedly not cool, but he's handsome and skater and smart. So I'm having trouble with that statement. At home, he finds a briefcase and some files that talk about his parents' research, and Uncle Ben says they used to work with Dr. Connors, who works at Oscorp doing research on regeneration. Peter goes there stealing a pass from the front desk and enters a room with a lot of spiders, and one of them bites him. When Stacy, who's Peter's secret love and classmate, is in the building too, because she's very smart and works there, but she also attends high school because I don't know. Anyway, Peter gets superpowers in a train and he's actually really funny, but I still hate this movie. I'm so sorry. The next day he meets Dr. Connors. They talk about his parents and Peter gives him the formula for regeneration as his father had figured it out before dying. Back at school, Peter fights with a classmate and then Uncle Ben is angry obviously, but at the same time Peter asks out Gwen, who was around. That's what I call good timing. When he gets home at night, his Uncle Ben is still angry and Peter goes out angry too, so his uncle follows him. Peter stops at a store and there is a thief, and the thief steals a few things and then runs away. And Uncle Ben tries to stop the man even though he was carrying a gun, and obviously he dies, come on. Peter then decides to use his powers for good things, suits up, and that's how the legend begins. At Oscorp, Dr. Connors says he needs time to develop the cure, but the owner of the company is dying, so he's told to hurry up. That's why Connors decides to use the thing on him. Wait a second. Isn't that familiar? Okay, maybe not. Connor transforms into a humanoid lizard and he wants revenge on the man who made him use the serum, and that's how he and Spider-Man end up fighting. Anyway, later the lizard changes his mind and decides to turn everybody into lizards, so Spider-Man has to stop him and he does that. The next movie is terrible, but I'll tell you a few things about it. This is the first movie where we see Electro, who will be in the next Spider-Man movie, so that's important. Harry Osborn, who wasn't in the movie, becomes the best friend of Peter all of a sudden, but he ends up killing Gwen after letting her fall from a building. Dang it, how dark is this? And that's about it. Now, if you remember, the first appearance of Tom Holland as Spider-Man was in Civil War, but this is about Spider-Man movies, not Avengers movies, so let's move on. In the first movie, Spiderman Homecoming, we have a scene from 2012. Remember, the first movie took place at that time. So Adrian Toomes and his team are cleaning the city after the Battle of New York, and they are really happy because they have a job and they'll make some money out of that. But Iron Man sends some people to do it in their place, and Toomes is like, we'll need a different job, I guess. So they steal some of the tech they found in the place and decide to create weapons from it and sell them. Years later, Peter is fighting crime, and after stopping an ATM robbery, he goes back home, still in costume, and he didn't remember he told his best friend Ned to meet him there, so that's a big surprise. At least he doesn't want to kill him like Harry Osborn. Though Ned is actually too excited about it, and from time to time he says too much, like Spider-Man will show up during a party and things like that. But that's not as important as that at some point Peter comes across with men working with Toomes, selling high-tech weapons. He tries to stop the guys, but Toomes shows up in a suit of some sort and throws Spider-Man into a nearby lake where he almost drowns. Iron Man rescues Peter, but it's not actually Iron Man, but an Iron Man suit that Tony Stark is controlling from India. Anyway, he tells Peter not to worry about the weapons and that he'll take care of that. Peter and Ned find a piece of tech left behind by the bad guys. They start studying the thing, and eventually Peter fights Toomes again, who was trying to steal more alien tech. He falls into a truck and is trapped, but he discovers the thing is unstable. That's when he remembers Ned had one of those things in his backpack. So he goes to the Washington Monument where Ned was and saves everybody, including Liz, a girl he's in love with. Peter doesn't know how to capture Toomes, so he looks for the man who they were trying to sell weapons to days before. He finds the man and he says those guns are too dangerous even for criminals, so he reveals where Toomes will be. Spider-Man runs to a ferry and tries to stop the bad guys, but in the middle of the fight the ferry's cut in half. Yeah, those weapons are way too much. Iron Man gets there and saves the day, but scolds Peter for not being careful and takes away his suit, which, in case you don't remember, Iron Man made for the boy. Peter is sad, but he goes back to do what an average teenager would do, trying to get a date. He invites Liz to the homecoming dance with him and she says yes, and that's so cool, but when he goes to her house to pick her up, Peter finds out her father is Toomes!
Oh my god!
I know, nobody was expecting that! To make things even worse, Toomes takes Peter and Liz to the dance, and Liz starts pointing out that Peter hasn't been around at the same time Spider-Man shows in all those dangerous situations. So when the two men are alone, Toomes says he'll kill Peter if he tries to stop him once again, especially as he's robbing something very important that day. After a few moments, Peter decides to leave Liz and chase her father, and they fight again, but this time the outcome is different. He even saves the criminal as his suit was about to explode. Iron Man then recognizes Peter's efforts and wants him to join the Avengers full time, but Peter says no, thank you. Now, it's important to keep in mind, after that movie, Infinity War and Endgame happened, and Spider-Man was dead for 5 years and Iron Man died, and I don't think that's a spoiler, because it's been 3 years now, and what else could you do during the lockdowns but watching old Marvel movies? Anyway, then in Spider-Man Far From Home, Peter is getting used to his life as student again, with all his friends, as somehow his friends disappeared too after Infinity War. What a good coincidence. In this movie he doesn't like Liz anymore, but instead he likes MJ, who's not Mary Jane but Michelle Jones. Peter wants to go on vacation, and that's a good thing, because the school plans a trip to Europe, and Peter thinks like, well, I do New York, you know, maybe New Jersey, but definitely not Europe. The group goes to Venice, but there a monster made of water appears and starts attacking people. Peter tries to do something, but he's no match for the creature. That's when a man called Quentin Beck arrives and saves everybody. At night, Fury, who was there too, introduces Spider-Man and Beck says he's from a different dimension and that these monsters destroyed his planet, so he's here to help save Earth. Well, I mean, this Earth. Fury also gives Spider-Man Tony Stark's glasses, and the next day he finds out the glasses allow him to control an artificial intelligence that's basically capable of destroying the world, or protecting it. But you know, like the last time Stark tried something like that, it wasn't that good. So Beck says the next attack will happen in Prague, and Fury uses his influence to change the destination of Peter's trips to that place. They go there and take down the thing too. Good news, finally! The world is safe, thank you! But not so much, that's because Spider-Man thinks it's better if Beck uses the glasses, as he's shown to be up to the task. Anyway, Peter goes out of that place, and then we get a revelation. The whole thing about the monsters was a lie! Dang it! Beck used to work for Stark, and he and other unhappy employees decided to trick the world into believing Beck was the ultimate superhero to be in charge of Earth.
Oh my god!
Peter then wants to confess his feelings to MJ, but she interrupts him and says he's a Spider-Man.
Oh my god!
Whoa, a lot of plot twists in this movie. He also shows him a piece of tech she got from one of the fights against the monsters because she was around, and they discover it's actually a projector. But Peter, come on, you met this guy 1 day ago and you gave him the glasses. Come on, seriously, come on. Peter runs to Berlin where Fury was supposed to be. He talks to the coolest man on Earth, but that was another illusion, and with a few more illusions, Peter is hit by a train. Beck thinks Peter is dead, but he's not dead yet, just badly injured, and in the Netherlands. Peter calls Happy, who takes him to London, where the group is now. Seriously, how can they still be traveling with all those monsters around? Now, I have more bad news, because Peter had told fake Fury that MJ knew about the illusions. So Beck goes to London and plans to have a final monster as a way of killing MJ and the rest of the class. I mean, you can never be too sure. Spider-Man fights Beck, but Beck uses drones with bullets, too many bullets, and he's shot to death by himself. Peter takes back the glasses, but more bad news, when he goes back to New York, fake footage shows him taking Beck's life and even revealing his identity. And that's about it. I actually love Spider-Man, he's one of my favorite superheroes, and I'm sure that it's one of your favorites too. So what about your favorite Spider-Man? Is it Tobey Maguire, is it Andrew Garfield, or is it Tom Holland? Just leave me a comment below. In my case, my favorite is Tobey Maguire. He'll always be my #1, seriously. I love his acting. So, I'm David, have a good day, and see you soon. Bye.